So, this talk is called A Decade of Dubious Decisions. And for once, most of them aren't my dubious decisions. Because this is kind of a talk about, oh, hang on. Right, go on, find yourself a seat. I'm only on the third slide, it's fine. So, this is basically about, I've now been kicking around the Perl community for about 10 years, or at least according to some people, you might rather regard it as 10 years of me inflicting myself on the Perl community, for better and for worse, and for various other things, most of which aren't printable. So, maybe you could argue it's an origin story sort of talk, or you could argue it's a slow descent into madness. That assumes, of course, I had any sanity when I first arrived, which is a matter for debate. So I am kind of talking about myself for most of this, which is, you know, something I'm generally perfectly happy to do, but not for quite this long at once. Not without a beer, anyway. You know, normally talking about yourself is something that's probably best reserved for, well, you know, as many things involving yourself in a quiet, darkened room where nobody else has to see. But this time, this is everybody else's fault. And I'm about to explain why. So, back in the year 2000, my first ever proper programming job. I mean, I had what was effectively an IT job previously, but it was search engine optimization, which in the year 2000, of course, meant keyword stuffing, which was so utterly unexciting that I automated it in QBasic. And then my boss, in his infinite wisdom, when I said, I've automated most of my job, can I have something else to do, went, sure, here. Have all the paperwork for the department because you can type as fast as the secretaries can. Yes, thank you. That was not quite what I had in mind. So I jumped ship a couple of weeks later to a different company and was working at an ISP. Now, I was originally hired to recreate my QBasic scripts in Visual Basic 6 for their search engine optimization department, which I spent all of 4 days on, because then there was a backup accident, which wiped out most of a website statistics system that their then sole Unix developer had been working on. By backup accident, I basically mean the backup guy was stoned off his face. Seriously, that company was fascinating. Second line support, which was basically backups and the Windows admins and whatever. Those of you who understand this, every Friday, half a 9-bar would come through that department and get distributed out across customer support. Yeah, 2000 ISPs were an interesting beast. Basically, there were the ones that were insane and massively underpaid their staff and did everything on a shoestring, and the ones who went bust because they were outcompeted by the insanity. So, backup accident. Boss calls me into the office, goes, hey, you said you knew Perl. Well, I'd kind of looked at a Perl script once and tried to fix it. But the guy wasn't allowed to give me a login to the Unix box, so I was trying to fix it by tweaking the logic in Notepad and sending the result back. This worked about as well as you might have thought. So I sort of went, well, I'll give it a go. So I got a 30-minute course in here's how to telnet into the main server, here's how to use C Shell, here's how to use Pico, 2000, BSDI. The best part of which was nobody had actually figured out that you could configure Pico to not line break. So anytime you had a line that was over 80 characters, Pico would break it, and you just got used to finishing typing your line of code out, going back up and hitting the unbreak line key combination. And got dumped with the Perl Bible in 3 parts on the desk next to me and told to build a stat system. So of course I needed a database backend. That was okay. But before we get there, so yes, CPAN. They had heard of CPAN. You could tell this by the fact that they were using DBI. They weren't using any other CPAN libraries. We didn't even use CGI.pm. No. What we had was a small for loop with a regex that was a copy-paste query parser that worked on the environment variable directly. We also, for the best thing, we had a little script that would take HTML and escape the right characters to turn it into print statements. The thing is, nobody had actually worked out that Perl allowed alternative quote characters than double quotes, or that Perl allowed multi-line strings. So it turned it into one \heavy print statement per line of HTML. Yes. The guy who wrote that script had long left the company by the time I discovered that Perl had multi-line strings and started cursing his name at some length. Yes, and database backend, oh well, they had Microsoft SQL Server 7 running on the Office intranet primary domain controller. It was okay. It was nice. It was nice because mostly what that did was run the ERP system, which was an SQL Server migration of an MDB file. Happily, the Microsoft Access stuff was not my problem. Although later I discovered, funny thing, there was a COM component called GenderX that wrapped the entire Perl 5 VM up for the sole purpose of exposing the regex engine. And I got the entire Windows team using that because that was my condition for being willing to debug their regex for them. However, I did somehow make it work, complete with reinventing the single pixel transparent GIF web bug. But it was an interesting value of work. Because, of course, I was trying to teach myself Perl, HTML, JavaScript, and SQL. And Perl was the only thing I had books on. And the SQL tutorials, because the Windows guys were Access guys, they weren't actually that good at SQL either. So the system went live, and when it first got a large customer on it, it completely fell over. And that was when I went and dug around for a better SQL tutorial, and discovered that what my colleagues had never discovered, because Microsoft Access, was the existence of group by. So I'd been doing that with hashes. Funnily enough, once I started actually using group by, it scaled rather better. But anyway, skipping forwards over several other fascinating train wrecks. Oh, and somewhere along the lines of here, I learned VI because I spent a while sysadmining dev servers for a software house. So we had 4 versions of Solaris, 2 of AIX, an Irix box, a SCO open server box, 3 Linux systems, all 3 BSDs. And all of the developers were Windows people, and they all had root. And I had absolutely no authority to kick them off these systems. So if you're wondering where my chainsaw-style approach to things came from, it's because I realized that my manager didn't actually mind if I solved this problem by making the developers too terrified to use root without permission. So in 2004, I landed at Netcraft, running the well-known web server survey and the less well-known and also insane SSL survey. The SSL survey produced possibly my second favorite complaint I have ever had about me from an outside entity during my career, which was the guy who went, "You're trying to exploit my SSH servers. Why are you trying to exploit my SSH servers?" I sent him a very polite email back going, This is the SSL survey. I'm afraid until I connect, I can't tell that you decided to run an SSHD on port 443. My favorite complaint was Company's House going, "Excuse me, you've taken out our entire website." It turned out that they returned a 500 instead of a 404 for missing records, and my code duly retried and denial of service their entire web front-end system. Anyway, so yeah, the SSL survey was about 200 scripts, a makefile that didn't work because nobody had maintained it, so you could use that as a rough guide, but you had to run all 200 scripts by hand over the course of a month, and they were a random mixture of Perl, Shell, and C Shell. Yeah. I have never forgiven C Shell. So I kind of needed a distraction in order to retain what shreds of sanity I had left. So I started playing with inline guile. Because, well, the thing is, right, I've been playing with Poe for stuff, and I've gone, okay, async is really fun, but, you know, this is 2004, you could already get as far as giving yourself callback hell, right? But nobody had really come up with the future concept yet. But you know, hang on a minute. What if, instead of trying to deal with that, I wrote the top-level code in a system with first-class continuations? Enter guile.pm. And of course, in the spirit of terrible puns, guile is a scheme. So it had first-class continuations and dynamic wind. And I managed to write a system where my top-level logic was Lisp code, and then any time it needed to do I/O, it delegated down to Poe code that re-invoked the continuation with the result once the async part was done. That actually worked really well. But the thing is, guile.pm, okay, so, you know the whole, like, works on my machine problem? This was actually even better, because it only installed on the developer's machine because he'd managed to not notice that at some point the makefile.pl only completed if an older version was already installed. Once I got over the concussion from how hard I head desked, I wrote a patch, sent the patch in. As is traditional, got no response for a week or so. So I emailed the author with, "Hey, dude, I actually kind of want to use this. Is there any chance you could cut a release?" And Sam Traeger, in his infinite wisdom, replied back with, "I'm sorry, I don't really care about this module anymore. But here's the link to sign up for a pause ID. And I'll give you co-mount." So if anybody's wondering why I'm so ready to say well volunteered to people, he did it to me first. So I duly signed up. So the reason my pause ID is MS Trout is that this was actually before I'd adopted MST as a moniker. So yeah, that's why that's the one thing that's inconsistent. Well, also my Unix username is still Matthew T, because that's what I had on that very first BSDI system. And you know, once you've got a username burned into your fingers, it's just easier to keep it. Anyway, so in 2005, we were just starting Shadowcat, and at that point, we were still doing custom web development rather than our current CPAN consultancy and commercial support stuff. So we were using Maypole under Mod Perl. But of course, Mod Perl, this was Apache 1, you could only have one copy of a particular set namespace within the Mod Perl install. So what do you do to deal with that? Well, obviously what you do is you generate out a separate namespace for each running copy of the app. And if it's 2005 and you got really excited about the new and exciting stuff, you might do it with XML and XSLT and Template Toolkit, generating class DBI and Maypole code. And it was better than that. I also managed to discover myself the hard way why it's a really bad idea to use XML as an executable scripting language. Basically, you had an XML file that went through XSLT that generated out a bunch of XML directives with embedded template toolkit that then generated out the tree of Perl modules for the mod Perl install. It was definitely a Spiderbaby, and to be entirely honest, it was a Spiderbaby made entirely out of crack. Later on, when we were working with a particular customer on an app made with that system, he thought, I know what I'll do. I could do with an extra contractor working on this. I'll get the guy who wrote Maypole in, who took one look at my code generation system and ran screaming from the project. So in a spirit of, I know this is horrible, but I'm not sure how to replace it with something that's less horrible, I started Googling around and went, hey, what's this catalyst thing? So, as is the tradition of my people, I cracked it open and started reading the source code, because that's always a more fun way of learning something than the documentation. And then I realized I wasn't sure about a couple of things, so I went, I remember this IRC thing, so I connected to irc.perl.org and joined #catalyst. Kept reading through the source code, and found a bug in the regex dispatcher. Pointed this out on channel, and SRI went, we'll write a patch for it then. I'm like, wait, hang on. I've not even make installed this yet. What? So I actually got my first patch into Catalyst within 24 hours of discovering it existed, and without having got as far as writing a line of Catalyst code yet. This seems to be a repeating pattern for me. I actually fixed a bug in the Perl 6 Vacudo build and install system before I got round to installing it. Then I thought, this is fun, so I stayed on IRC. In hindsight, this may have been a terrible mistake, but also in hindsight, I regret many things, but this is not one of them. Other people may, however. So a little later on, hang on a second, I need something that will tell me what time it is. That's not too bad. Sorry? Yep. So, Marcus Ramberg, Subversion Repository Admin, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll have a go at that. And then he went, cool, here's root on the server, I'm out, have fun. That was definitely a mistake. I learned many things, including how to do a server-side rebase on an SVN repository. Basically, you dump it, perl-pi-e the dump files, and load them back into Subversion. It does work. I'm very glad Git made it not necessary. So, Catalyst 5.5. Hang on, 12 minutes? I thought I was on a 40 or 50 slot here. Did somebody allocate it as 30? Oh, cool. I'll have to speed up slightly then. Okay, so, I had an idea. Basically, let's refactor the dispatcher. So Sebastian, in his infinite wisdom, said, hey, make a branch. I'm like, but I don't have a commit bit, because I was the repository admin. I've been giving other people permissions, but I didn't give mine anything. He's like, well, give yourself a commit bit for sake. Oh, bollocks. Seriously, I miss those days. Sebastian as project leader, me doing architecture. Sebastian has always been, always will be a better API designer than me. And I was the resident back-compat loon, so we could produce nicer APIs and I could keep the old ones working. And also, he loved doing evangelism, and I loved staying in the background doing infrastructure. Seriously, I did not want to be publicly visible. This may come as a surprise. Meanwhile, Class DBI. So, Class DBI Suite was a set of extensions that I contributed to. I added join and prefetch support to it. But Class DBI itself was creaking at the seams. So I talked to Tony Bowden, the Class DBI maintainer, said, I don't think we can extend this without breaking stuff. Maybe we should research how we do a version 2. He goes, sure, go and do that. So I was talking to people about this, talked to CL Cow, and he went, hey, class DBI was the wrong namespace anyway. You should call it DBIX class. So it was a research project at this point. Tony burns out due to basically epic pressure and lawyers being arseholes while he was selling his company. And suddenly I had users using it in production from random cuts of some version trunk when it still said experimental mate your data. That was not what was supposed to happen. So that's how DBIX class got a stable release cycle and a serious emphasis on back compat just because of how scared I was that it was going to eat somebody's production data. So going further back, an odd set of chances. There was a Discworld convention in, I think, Liverpool when I was a teenager, which I went to with my parents. And then I went on a trip from theatre studies in college to Lancaster and made friends during the interval with a couple of Discworld fans because I was wearing the t-shirt. That resulted in me moving to Lancaster, which resulted in me joining Mark Keating's D&D group, and thereon everything else. So yeah, the rest is history and the rest of this talk. So yeah, Terry Pratchett and Gary Gygax. It might be slightly their fault as well. Rest in peace, you brilliant beardy bastards. So moving on. All good things come to an end. Sebastian leaves the Catalyst project while we're prepping for 5.70. We had lots of people with lots of ideas, but nobody actually starting on them. So I'm like, what are you waiting for? Seriously. Fuck it, look, go. Start doing this. These are cool ideas. And suddenly people started developing stuff. We got chained in, which is, you know, it's probably my best addition to Catalyst. Amazingly powerful, complete pain in the arse to learn. This is because it was the first thing I designed without Sebastian writing the APIs for me. He could have made it pretty as well as that powerful. But yeah, so we suddenly had development happening. And suddenly people were looking at me as being in charge. I'm like, wait, hang on, I wasn't trying to be in charge. All I did was shout go, but apparently that counts. So yeah, irc.perl.org. We had channels run by opbots, so you have to keep them opt for them to op everybody else. So if a channel screws up and forgets, you need an oper to fix it. So I kept bugging the opers when that was a problem because I did the care and feeding of the opbots for a lot of channels. And Pete Sargent, in his infinite lack of wisdom, went, here, have an O-line, you can do it yourself now stop fucking bugging me. That then moved me on to ending up helping to run IRC servers, and is how Shadowcat ended up running like half the servers for irc.perl.org now, because it was easier for me to provision systems than to deal with the problems of having it broken. Because we need irc.perl.org, because we need to be able to get in touch with the community while we're working on stuff for customers. And also it's a backup if our internal IRC goes down. We're far from the only company that does that. On a couple of occasions, I've had the CEOs of other Perl companies come and grab me privately and go, by the way, thanks very much. Our internal IRC server died and we reformed on irc.perl.org until we could fix it. Always nice. Similar story with pause as well. Because I used to do help with module adoptions. Because, you know, you've got a big ecosystem, people come and go for whatever reasons, real life happens to them, they change jobs. So you need to either prove the old author is gone, or get them to give permission before they disappear. And I spent a lot of time chasing around to do that. And then you need a pause admin to actually hand out the permissions. So I used to talk to Adam Kennedy and get him to do it. And eventually he went, you know what, I'm just clicking buttons for you here. I'm just going to get you a pause admin bit, then you can click them. Which is why these days when we're trying to get permission stuff, I'm fucked. I am generally the first person that people grab because I'm usually happy to do that. But it's fun. So in 2010, Jesse Vincent went, hey, do you want to do a bleed release? I'm sorry, I am going as fast as I can, but it was, nobody told me they cut 25% off my slot. I only looked at the start time on the schedule, I'm stupid. Anyway, so, YAPC, because I ended up swapping with somebody because he had kid stuff to do. Only afterwards did I realize that meant I was doing a release during the conference. So I'm trying to get this release cut. I'm also trying to write my slides, because I always do that at the last minute. I just about got it right, which resulted in Rafael Garcia Suarez making a little bit of fun of me, because at the time I was on the Iron Man forfeit. So my hair looks like that. So he tweets, releasing Pearl 5, now so easy a blonde can do it. To which my only response is that. Few other dubious decisions, mostly involving other people not running away fast enough. Mark Keating, I said to him, maybe we should start a consultancy. After all, how hard can it be? And he still said yes. I have no idea why, but you know, we have been selling CPAN commercial support since, which is why I'm here. He's now Pearl Foundation marketing chair. I have no idea how this happened. If he was here, he'd be telling you, please buy a support contract. Anyway, so the YAPCs. State of the Velociraptor was basically created as a state of Pearl 5. The idea of the community talking to itself, but also mostly people were complaining that Larry was talking about Pearl 6 in all of his keynotes. Well, yes, that's what he'd spent the last 10 years on. What do you think he's going to talk about? But no, people complained. So fine, let's have a Pearl 5 keynote as well. And Larry's comment afterwards, I think, showed that it was taken in the spirit it was meant. The thing about that is, it was always meant to be an institution more than just a person. So I started getting stale. Fortunately, Sawyer X was too stupid to run away fast enough. The X is for extra gullible, but also for extra awesome. So yeah, to Sawyer, thanks for giving me a break, and apparently also now RJBS. Last one, Mark Keating again. So Greg McCarroll, I don't know if any of you remember him, used to do the YAPC EU auctions. 1 year they auctioned a book of mine that had the leaf page covered in swearing. He said, hey, people went, read it out. He went, okay, €100 to the Pearl Foundation for that. 5 people volunteered €20 each instantly. So he goes, okay, right, I will read it out, I will read it out. But for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm Dave Cross. So he was London PM leader. And basically, we talked Mark into helping with London Pearl Workshop, then ran away and left him to it. And that's worked out well. Mark ran London Pearl Workshop for 10 years, and I believe he's hoping this year is going to be his last year, because he has a couple of people helping him, and next year he's going to run away and leave them to it. So congratulations to Neil Bowers and Rick Della, and whoever else got roped in, because there's probably more people. But to finish off, if there's a moral to this story, the first one is, don't wait for people to shout go. If you think your idea is going to be cool, try building it and see what people think. If you spot somebody waffling about that, tell them it's a good idea and shout go at them. You don't have to be a name to shout go at people. People started treating me as a name because I was shouting go at people, right? And also, you're probably the wrong person to do this. See also Devil Declare. She's, well, it did achieve its goal, which was when somebody actually competent to write something like that first looked at the C code, they screamed and added the keyword API to Perl core and obsoleted it, which was basically the point. But it does mean you're 100% better than nobody at all. And the basic lesson is, important things aren't done by the best person to do the job. Because I've pretty much never been that for any of these things. They're done by whoever turns up. So, you know, turn up. It's fun. Honest. And finally, everything is usually my fault. Well, I'm Sam Traeger's fault, and he's not here to argue. So, you know, blame him, please. Thank you very much.